on this episode. You mentioned the Zodiac Killer earlier, and there's obviously a lot of parallels here.
They're fucked up, they're sick people, and that's why they do it.
He's assaulting these people. There's always something else.
The last thing that you're gonna do is write a fucking letter to the police.
What's the recurring theme there? It's kind of mommy issues, right?
It is. You're gonna do everything you possibly can to not get caught, right?
Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Dive into these histories, cocktails and conspiracies. Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Uncover those anomalies, cocktails and conspiracies.
Is your website still stuck in 2009, or worse, built by your cousin's friend who kind of knows WordPress?
No! God, please, no!
It's time for an upgrade. At sfx.com, we specialize in custom web design, SEO, and full-service IT solutions tailored for small businesses that are ready to scale. Whether you're just starting out or reinventing your brand, the team at sfx.com brings strategy, style, and serious tech skills to every project. Visit s-fx.com today, where small businesses get big solutions.
Visit s-fx.com today.
Summer of 1976 in New York City, a city already on edge. Crime is rising, the blackout is looming, and a sweltering heat wave keeps people restless and sleepless. Then, in the Bronx, on the night of July 29th, a young woman named Donna Loria and her friend Jody Valenti are sitting in a parked car outside Donna's home. A man approaches, pulls a revolver, and without words, fires. Donna is killed instantly, but Jody survives. At first, police write it off as another senseless shooting in an already violent city. But that was just the beginning. Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, whether you are tuning in across the nation or around the world. My name is Shane Skwarek, here with the maestro of magnificence, or I guess it should probably be mischief because it makes a lot more sense to the show, Mr. Philipps.
How many
We're back
people are listening
for
right now with their
another
earbuds
episode.
in that want to murder you? Somebody's just
Another
out for a
episode of
jog.
Cocktails and conspiracies. He's not even letting me finish my damn
No.
intro.
I'm not.
Well, I hope by now people realize that the intro, you probably want to just maybe tone the earbuds down just a tad, pop them out of your ear. You can hear it across the street. That's our way to get you fired up.
It is.
Wouldn't you say, Mr. Phillips?
You know what? I think it was an exceptional intro today. Exceptional intro. Bravo. Good job. That's it. That's the whole show, folks.
That's it. That's it. I mean, he does say that kind of often. So at this point, I'm not going to take too much to that. I'll take the compliment on the intro. But you know what? The voice is feeling good. I think we're ready to go. We're rip-ropping, roaring, ready. Yeah, I think we're in good shape over here. That's all.
Let's
That's all,
talk
baby.
about it. Fear City, baby.
So tonight we're talking Fear City. So what that means for most of you, again, we're kind of keeping the trend with like what's happening, what's popular, what's going on the Netflix era over there. And the latest breaking one is in relation to the Son of Sam. New documentary just dropped. I guess it was probably a couple weeks ago now. Am I right?
Yeah, maybe 2-3 weeks ago.
Maybe 2-3 weeks ago in there. It's a topic that's not new by any stretch of the imagination, unlike the one we covered last week with Amy Lynn Bradley. But it's one that we are, I'd say, pretty intimately familiar with and decided that this was a good opportunity as any to talk about it. And so we dove into the Son of Sam. The long and short of it, if for those not familiar, is the story of David Berkowitz, who went around and was just randomly shooting people dead in their cars for about a year in New York City. no real rhyme or reason to it. There was really no pattern to the murders he was committing. He just sort of did it. And that was the end of it. And there was really no evidence because the murders were so random. There's no direct evidence that we're pointing out who it might be. And typically, if you're into the true crime stuff, they always look at the family that are close to him and whatnot. But this wasn't the case at all with David Berkowitz. But his story takes a lot of twists and turns that I think we're going to get into here a little bit throughout the course of the show. So if you are new to the story, hopefully we can cover that. We're not going to, as you know, with this show at this point, we don't deep dive into everything or anything. We are your average everyday Joe Schmoes here that are just trying to take surface level talks, ask some silly questions that your deep dive podcast won't ever ask. They just assume and kind of give our own speculation, our own thoughts about here. Mr. Phillips, this isn't the first documentary we've seen on David Berkowitz or the Son of Sam, is it?
No, Sons of Sam is my favorite one. That debuted on Netflix. I don't want to give you the exact year because it's probably wrong, but it was before the most recent one that came out, and that's the one. And I think most people our age, anybody that's kind of into weird shit, conspiracy, true crime, you're all familiar with the Son of Sam murders. But it was that documentary that really got me hooked. I wouldn't say hooked, but very interested in Son of Sam, or possibly Sons of Sam, because it really introduced the conspiracy that maybe it wasn't just Berkowitz acting alone.
Yeah, that was being familiar with the whole Son of Sam case. That one was very intriguing to me as well, for a lot of the same reasons you mentioned. The idea that he didn't do this alone, but I don't want to go there just yet. I want to kind of start a little bit with this documentary that came out, Conversations with a Killer. It's not the first time Netflix has done something like this. They've been doing that a lot with a lot of the different serial killers of, I guess, our modern era.
They did it with Dauber, Bundy.
Yeah,
it's very good.
And I guess a nice nod to our show. It's a very realistic look at what the show is, and so I really like that a lot. There's a couple points to kind of tackle here. We're not going to walk through all of the murders one by one, but one of the biggest, I guess, keys in the case was that randomness that Berkowitz had, where he would just literally walk around one night, decide that, you know what, I don't like these people that are sitting in this car right here, and I'm just going to go pop 1, 2, 3 and take them out. And not to make light of that, just kind of navigating some of the terminology we can and can't use here. What was interesting, though, is when he was caught, he claims that he got himself caught. Like, he intentionally left evidence behind, which was him getting a parking ticket. And when the police actually finally surrounded his apartment, he walked outside and he got caught. He smiled. He admitted to everything right away. He didn't want a trial. He admitted guilty. He's like, why would I go to trial? I did all this. I did it all. And he really took pride in that, which is unusual for anybody, let alone somebody that's a serial killer for any length of time. Did you find that a little off kilter, like uncomfortable, or did you just think that was par for the course for a nut job?
Well, I mean, look, everybody's watched enough true crime now, right? Look, if you have Netflix, you're watching true crime, and you don't need to be an expert to know at this point that a lot of these people crave attention, right? So, and we talked about that a lot when we covered the Zodiac, right? Like, the letters and things of that nature, you're craving attention. And so, no, I wouldn't say that I was thrown off by the fact that he just totally admitted to everything, right? Like, at some point, and I feel like with these guys, or girls, it's mostly guys, at some point they know they're going to get caught. And I think at some point, some of them kind of want to, because they want that recognition. They want people to know. They have nothing else in their lives. Like, the common denominator between most of these serial killers is they're just low lives. They have nothing going on for them. Obviously, there's more than one fucking screw loose in their head, and so they're craving this attention. And when the jig is finally up, I think some of them are actually kind of happy about it. So, yeah.
Right, because now you've got a level of fame
exactly
that comes along with that. There was a lot of turns to the story, and we'll kind of deep dive into them a little bit later, but one of which, you alluded to in the Sons of Sam documentary, how there could have been multiple people and whatnot, and that really lends itself into a satanic cult. And Berkowitz does come out and kind of allude to that at one point during the hearing, saying like, oh, I did these cases, I did these murders and I didn't do these other ones, and suggested those other people. He later rescinds that. But also along the lines, the son of Sam ends up being his neighbor, and his neighbor has this dog that's absolutely driving him bonkers. At one point, he starts saying that he was possessed by the dog, and he starts talking a lot about that, and how the dog is like speaking to him and
dog is
giving
a
him
demon.
Right, like those were his next targets, to the point where he actually goes and tries to actually kill this dog. It was unsuccessful in his attempt, but I think the dog later succumbs to some other injuries. But it's a weird twist to add into that story.
It is, and I just want to point out some inconsistencies with what Berkowitz is saying and what he actually did early on, right? And what I find weird about that whole thing is that it especially if you watch their newer documentary, what is it, Confessions of a Killer? He talks about roaming the streets for hours, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours, just roaming the streets, sometimes literally for days at a clip, looking for somebody to kill. And so it's just inconsistent with, hey, I'm getting direction from a dog on specific people to kill, and then you're roaming the streets for days looking for somebody to kill. So it just kind of lends itself to Berkowitz being a complete fucking nut job at the end of the day.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's kind of an important angle that was really unraveled a little bit more in the latest docuseries that came on there, and I think is sort of a catalyst for maybe the larger part of this. His target, especially initially, was just young women that were sitting in cars. They had a very specific look to them. I think it was always a brunette hair, about shoulder length, whatnot. And then it sort of became couples, and he was hanging out at Lover's Lane. A man slighted at some point, got brokenhearted at some point, and decides that if I'm not going to be happy, nobody's going to be happy. It kind of just, I tend to wonder, again, not to make light of the situation, but like if the guy was just able to get a nut off, does this all kind of go away at some point? But that's the impression that I got in the conversation with the killer. In particular, like his confessional tapes is like he's talking a lot about that, and this like scorn that he has for these people that are living there. Now, I know this ends up being tied to his adoption and the whole process there. I know people that are adopted, and I'm not one of them, so I can't speak to what that feeling is, but they're very, very happy in the lives they are. They love the parents that they have today. That's certainly not always the case, but for all intents and purposes, it seemed like the Berkowitz family was pretty good to him, I think, at some point. Sound like the father, they didn't really lean on it in Confessions of a Killer, and I don't remember Sons of Sam, but it sounds like the father might have been a little bit of a dick. I'm getting that impression. I'm getting the impression maybe he was a little abusive or stern, but they didn't directly say that. And so by all accounts, they were a happy Jewish family living in the suburbs of New York, right? I wonder how much of his motivation was by lovers he couldn't have or didn't have versus the mother situation, right? Like they alluded to the fact that when he found his mother, found out she was alive, and basically she was a whore, that really pissed him off and he was dumped off.
Yes.
I don't know that was the catalyst, because obviously this was already in motion, in so much as it maybe have been like a tipping point for him, like the final blow. It's just like, like I'm over it now. Now I'm just going to go completely apeshit. What do you think?
No, look, I think that's a good point, right? And also going back to his adopted mother, he had a very good relationship with his adopted mother at one point, and then as he got a little bit older, like preteen, teenage years, he really acted out a lot, and I know was almost kind of abusive towards her. But at least in the Confessions of a Killer, they allude to the fact that he was very close to his mother and really loved his adopted mother, who at some point passed away when he was a child. And so if you kind of take that from my perspective, right, he loves his mother. It's the most important person in his life, his adopted mother, right? She passes away. He eventually then finds out that he's adopted. He goes on this search to find his not adopted mother, I'm sorry, his oh my god, his birth mother.
Biological, yep.
Biological mother. English, I can do it, baby. And then finds out.
Haven't set in yet, guys. That's
they haven't even set in. This is just me.
Cocktails and the conspiracies. They got to set in.
So then finds his birth mother, and she winds up, to your point, being a fucking complete scumbag whore. And when you kind of tie those two pieces together, like, it's almost like he was searching, trying to get his dead mother back, right? Like, oh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, of
like,
course.
I have another woman that could be important to me in my life that I could love. I can get mom back.
Right.
And then he's
Right.
so repulsed and so disgusted. Now, obviously, you've got to be totally fucked in the head for that to be the catalyst to then go and take somebody else's, and not just one person, but 6 other people's lives because of that. But yeah, maybe it had something to do with it.
You know, it's the way you said that just kind of like struck like a thought in my mind. You always hear about like girls that have daddy issues, right? And like what's the standard issue, like cookie cutter path of those girls, daddy issues, bang, 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 bang. We all know what that
Right.
journey looks like. When you start to look at some of these cases though, serial killers or just kind of like sometimes some of these nut jobs, right? These guys, what's the recurring theme there? It's kind of mommy issues, right? Like
It is.
and it's women issues in a broader scope, but it all starts with the mother. They have a good relationship with a woman. The woman's stricken from their lives at some point, and they try to replace that, and nobody really gives them that time of day, and then it just sends them out in the spiral. Just kind of a weird sidebar there that came to my mind. I thought might be of somewhat relevance here.
Yeah, it all does at some point get tied back to a parent, doesn't it?
Weird, right? Right. Yeah. Yeah. So childhood,
Don't fuck your
the
kids up,
unity of
people.
a family, seriously, the unity of your family life, really very impactful. You mentioned the Zodiac Killer earlier, and there's obviously a lot of parallels here because the son of Sam, Berkowitz, starts writing letters into the NYPD and the Daily News, not in the same vein as the Zodiac. He's not necessarily using ciphers, but he is being very cryptic in his words and taunting them quite a bit. And you know, we later find out in his confessions that he was very much inspired by the Zodiac Killer, by Jack the Ripper, which are 2 episodes that we've done on the show before. Go back, check those archives, and check them out. But it was interesting to kind of see that come to fruition once again, and to once again see certain members of the news sort of latch onto that and really like push it, taunt him back, call him back out a little bit, try to get him going, especially in that 1-year anniversary of the killings there. But that kind of lends credence to what you said before, the theatrics almost
Right.
of this nut job to want to flirt with being caught, give just enough to really heighten this to much bigger than what it probably would have been outside of those letters.
Yeah, well, dude, when you think about it, right? Like, if you killed somebody, right? I don't mean you specifically, but just let's somebody murder somebody, right? You don't want to get caught. You're going to do everything you possibly can to not get caught, right? You're going to cover your ass as much as possible. The last thing that you're going to do is write a fucking letter to the police. Why don't I shouldn't say all, but why do very notable serial killers write letters to the police, right? I mean, the Unabomber did it, right? Zodiac did it. Son of Sam did it, right? I'm sure there's many others that I'm not remembering right now. Point being, they're flirting with it. They want that fame. They want that notoriety.
It's a
Not in a
game.
good way, but they want it. It's a game to them. They're fucked up. They're sick people, and that's why they do it. It wasn't a really very well thought out thought, but yeah, that's what came to me.
Well, we get where you're getting.
Proceed.
At. We get where you're getting.
Proceed.
At, Mr. Phillips. Diving into a little bit of the son's theory here. It was interesting to me because the Netflix docu that just came out really didn't touch on this. I was actually very dismissive of it, which I like and I didn't like. It painted a very different picture, and I think the idea. Okay, let me backtrack a little bit. The Sons of Sam theory, conspiracy theory, is very much satanic cult in nature. That Berkowitz kind of gets sucked into the satanic cult, and it's directing him. He's part of a group that's doing this, and there's these slain murders. And one of the detectives in it said outright, you know, when Berkowitz got caught, the murder stopped. I don't know how accurate that is necessarily. I think that certainly isn't the case. There's plenty of other murders in New York City, but maybe that particular string of them stopped. But I thought that was interesting because there were other witness accounts that identified different suspects of varying hair colors, builds, heights. The composite sketches didn't match Berkowitz. And some of the survivors even insisted that Berkowitz wasn't, in fact, their shooter, whereas others actually insisted that he was, and he wasn't taking credit for it later on down the line. The human mind, Mr. Phillips, we've established in a lot of other episodes, is not always the most reliable, especially in a state of panic. I mean, what do you remember like one of the more traumatizing things in your life?
I mean, yeah, sure, I remember them, but I say this to my kids all the time, right? Like my kids will have, and I remember as a kid having like the best memory. I could tell you verbatim, word for word, exactly what you said in a 10-minute speech 2 years ago, right? I could do that when I was a kid because I only had 7 years worth of memories. Now I've got almost 40 years worth of memories shoved in my fucking
Fair.
head. Something else has to go if I'm putting something new in, right?
Mm.
So, yeah, I mean, I think I vividly remember some of these traumatic events, but who knows if I'm remembering them correctly.
I was once hit by a school bus while waiting to board a bus. It was actually smacked into me and a bunch of other kids. True story. Do you remember that or no?
I do remember, yes.
I couldn't for the life of you tell you what that bus driver looked like. She could be standing in front of me. I would never know. Was it traumatic? No, I mean, I didn't get hurt. Nobody really got hurt. It was just more, I guess it was traumatic in the sense that it happened,
Right.
but like it could have been much worse. And you'd think that was like a staple part of life. I couldn't for the life of me. And she was my daily bus driver. Or was she? No, she wasn't. She was the bus driver next to us. It wasn't the daily one. Couldn't remotely tell you what she looks like. And in fact, I think about this often when I see a lot of these documentaries, and I think about like, they ask people to come up with these composite sketches. Sometimes I'll just like meet people
Mhm.
one time only, and like later on during the day, I'm like, what could I describe what that person looked like? Outside of saying, they're like about my height, right? Give or take a few inches. I probably would get that wrong. And like the generic features, like what color hair they have, like is their face squared or circular? I couldn't remember if there's a mole on their face. I couldn't remember if their eyes are kind of like off centered. I couldn't remember if they had like a tattoo on their arm or their shoulder. Like those details, I feel like I'd plug in to kind of patch my story together, right? And so when I think about composite sketches and I think about that being the tie in to were there other people involved, I think it's a little loose. I also kind of liken back to what you said before about really enjoying the notoriety. And I don't know that Berkowitz, if there was any sort of a crime that aligned to what he was doing, that he wouldn't just assume the credit for it anyway, right? It ties into my narrative. It makes me bigger than life. So if that's kind of aligned to what I did, and you think I did it, sure, what the hell? I did it. I got one life already. What's the difference between 1 or 40 of them? Who cares at
Right.
that point, right? Except the way I go down in history. So I don't know that aspect of it was really a motivating decision in my opinion on the case. Having said that, the satanic cult thing does make a little bit of sense. And I'll let you take that because it seems to be a little more fresh on your mind. Why do you think that theory holds water?
Well, if you look at, you have to look at a large part of that actually comes from the letter, right? So and I'll be honest, I don't remember how many letters, if it was one or multiple letters that were written.
Multiple, yeah.
I know there was certainly like the first one was the big one, but if you look at the themes and the verbiage used in the initial letter, and really all of them, they're very doomsday cult like satanic. They literally mention Satan, right? They talk about Beelzebub and the monster and the devil, and so there's a lot of overtones of things that you would assimilate with a satanic cult, right? So that's really where that comes from. And then if you kind of take a look at counterculture and what was popular in the 70s and 80s, I don't know if you could ever call counterculture popular, but you get my point, right? Like satanic cults were like a big, like scary, thing to people in the suburbs, right? Like, oh my God, satanic. Like, do you remember that as a kid? Like, not that we grew up in the 70s and 80s, but like even growing up in the 90s, like I remember like not like being worried about like satanic cults and Satan worshippers in the woods and you know what I
Sure.
mean? So
Sure.
like that's kind of always been a thing, but I think it really harkens back to the letters and the overtones and the verbiage used, and really for those, and really his name was Maury Terry was the journalist behind the Sons of Sam, who I think did a fantastic job, right? Not saying that he was 100% spot on with everything that he talked about or all the his theory was necessarily correct, but I thought it was done very well. But Untermeyer Park was a park in Yonkers where Berkowitz lived. And in Untermeyer Park, it was suspected that there was a satanic cult that was meeting in that park. Now, granted,
I think that was even confirmed, wasn't it?
It wasn't yes and no, right? So to dig a little bit deeper into that satanic cult, Maury Terry. I can't say his name very well. Maury Terry.
I mean, they're both correct what you're saying, so I'm not sure what you're hung up on here.
It just doesn't flow out of my mouth very well. I feel like I have marbles in my mouth. Anyway, it's like when I say "Okay, Google." Anyway, my Google's gonna go off now.
Yep, so is mine.
Yeah. Train of thought. Let's go back to this. So Terry proposes that there was a cult, a satanic cult called the Children, which was supposed to be an offset of another cult, a much larger cult, that was operating in Yonkers at the time. They used Untermeyer Park as their meeting grounds. And the police, to your point, they didn't necessarily ever confirm that there was this cult that existed, but they did find graffiti of like upside down crosses and pentagons, things that you would assimilate with satanic rituals. They did find dead animals, specifically dead dogs, mutilated dogs, and look, in New York City, especially at that point in time, there was literally like wild packs of dogs roaming around. Like, I grew up in Staten Island, even in the 90s, and I remember in my neighborhood, like, there was just wild fucking dogs that would roam the street and just chase you.
Now it all makes sense. Now it
That is
all
true.
makes sense. The carryover from a couple episodes ago. I don't even remember which episode that was. Todd out there, the discussion with the dogs, the Vicky episode. Oh, it all
You're
makes
right.
sense. Why
Maybe
he
it goes
hates
back to that,
dogs.
dude. I don't
There
hate
it is.
dogs. I just don't want them.
Trauma.
I just don't want them in my
It's all
home.
about
They
the
don't
childhood
belong in
trauma.
my home. You know, one actually followed me home and fucking ran into my house, so that my mother was gonna have a heart attack one day.
Listen to this. Daddy issues creates an OnlyFans model. Mommy issues creates a Son of Sam. Doggy issues creates a Mr. Phillips. There we go. We solved all of life's problems.
That's it. We solved the mystery, baby. We solved the mystery.
Wild dogs run around in the park. Go ahead.
Right? So that wasn't uncommon for there to be wild dogs, but animals, A, generally don't die by being mutilated, right? And B, when a wild animal dies, like, you don't, like, if you go walk around the woods, you're not gonna just find bones. It's not a common thing. They find, like, a hiding spot, and they curl up and they die. Under a tree, in a bush, whatever it might be, right? So if you're finding dead dogs, I think it's certainly plausible to connect it to some kind of occult activity, whether that be satanic or not. But that's really where overall the whole satanic cult thing comes from. It really comes from Maury Terry and his connection of Berkowitz was a part of the satanic cult that used Untermeyer Park as kind of their meeting grounds. And I shouldn't leave out his neighbors, John and Michael Carr, who were also supposedly in that cult, whose father's name was Sam.
Well, that
Throw
was
that
also
out
the,
there.
that was the neighbor of the dog, which is where the dog.
Correct. That was
Son
the
of
name of
Sam
the dog.
came
It
from.
also happened to be their father's name, Son of Sam.
Right. And the sister often said, I think when they had called the sister when they were trying to identify Berkowitz, said that, the guy's a nut job and whatnot. But the two brothers were definitely kind of nuts too, and were friends with David
100%.
Berkowitz. So there was certainly not, there was certainly something there. They weren't complete strangers, although the dog pissed him off. When he tried to attack the dog, right? Like, obviously, if they didn't know him to some degree, that you would have the cops, their guy would have been arrested. And for whatever reason, that nothing ever materialized out of that for one reason or another.
Right.
I understand the plausibility of being impacted by a satanic cult. I start to understand the claims a little bit of saying, the dog is speaking to me, or I'm getting a message, I'm being told what to do. I don't know. When I think about that, right now we're crossing the realm from reality into kind of like the supernatural thing, right? You get into the ghosts, you get into the spirits. I think that's a heavy lift for a lot of people. And I think that's partially why there's not a lot of credence lent to the satanic aspect of the cult. I agree with you. Satanic cults were a big thing even into the 90s. I think even still today, you probably see that in small sects around. It's just maybe not as mainstream as it once was. I don't know also that the idea of those types of cults is rooted really in that supernatural, right? Like, maybe some of the people that are involved in it think that they're doing that, but I don't think that they're gathering around in a circle and they're summoning a demon, in so much as they're just sort of maybe convinced that they are, as they're being fed things to do under somebody's malicious guidance. Um, and I use those terms very, very strategically, or very intentionally, I should say. Malicious and guidance. There was something else that was going on in the 1970s that we've covered quite a bit in this podcast. And in fact, our very first episode of Cocktails and Conspiracies, I guess our second, our first one was sort of a teaser. We discussed a program called MKUltra, which is a noted, proven, like confirmed government program in which the US government was using mind control techniques, a variety of them, to basically get people to do things that they wouldn't normally do, driving them crazy. There is very briefly touched on in the Confessions of a Killer. I think too as Sons of Sam as well. But David Berkowitz served in the military from 1971 to 1974. MKUltra, as it was called, MKUltra officially ended in 1973. Now we know that it was called something else beforehand. We know that it was later called something else afterhand. That happens all the time in government jobs.
Yeah.
I had a little bit of a thought there. Berkowitz joins the army, thinks he's, all gung-ho, he's ready to go. He's basically relegated to be nothing, like a nobody, right? He's shipped out to South Korea, where the U.S. was most notably known for holding psychological experiments as part of MKUltra. He's an infantryman. He's talked quite a bit in his own claims about being controlled or commanded to kill, which really aligned very well with the MKUltra themes, voices in your heads, these ideas of possession, external control. In the Sons of Sam documentary, one of the things that have really stuck out to me in that series was there was a moment when they were talking about he'd get a phone call and he'd sort of be like scrambled and then all of a sudden like think that he was getting instructions from the dog. Now, in the Confessions of a Killer, he comes out and basically says he made all of that stuff up. He didn't want to plead insanity when he was in his case, but all of a sudden started making up this stuff about that too. And he kept like making statements and then retracting them and then just sort of took all the brunt for it and then, became a devout Christian and so forth. But I couldn't help but think, if he's now exposed, I mean, if you look at the guy now, right? And if you look at all of the historical figures that are tied into MKUltra or the profile that they were looking for, they were typically broken people that generally would come from broken homes. They would be very isolated, just kind of like those shot mess type people. The profile for David Berkowitz aligned really well, despite the fact that he came from this Jewish family that seemed to be very well grounded. He did have a lot of the other issues going on, wanted to get away from home, was really gung-ho, wanted to become a son of Sam in the United States Army, right? So think about that too. The double entendre of the dog being the owner Sam's pet, but then also the United States military. I don't think that's coincidence. Why wouldn't you have been the son of the dog? Why were you the son of the dog's owner, right? It just didn't make sense to me there. But that's really where I think the satanic cult thing comes into play. I think there is plausibility to me that there was a cult, but it wasn't a cult. It was more of a handler, right? Maybe it was a grouping of people. And I think they could have masked that underneath the guise of the hysteria against satanic cults to just sort of get people off the scent. But again, I'm looking at the timeline here. Berkowitz, 71 to 74 in South Korea, the hotbed for these psychological experiments. He gets discharged, which kind of breaks him down. Like that's not something he wanted to be doing, right? He really wanted to be a part of it all, and he's just relegated to nothing. It was an honorable discharge. Returns to New York, attends community college, worked a series of low-level jobs. He just didn't have a very eventful life, and then all of a sudden, boom, just kind of snaps and goes mad.
Yeah.
Am I nuts? Am I on the
no,
right track
so
here?
two things about that, right? So not only was Berkowitz in the military, but one of the Carr brothers also served in the Air Force. I don't know if he was in Korea or not, but I know he served in the Air Force. I don't know which brother it was, but I'm positive one of them did. But let's go back to the psychological makeup of a serial killer, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you look at a lot of serial killers, they have their first kill, and then maybe it's years later they have their second kill. and then it's years later they have their third, and then the time frame kind of shortens in between the killings, right? It's almost like they're perfecting it, right? They become more comfortable with it, right? But to your point, it's almost like Berkowitz just snapped one day and went on a killing spree, right? Now, I know that he was accused of killing dogs, which animal torture and killing of animals is common in psychological makeups of serial killers, but there's not a long history when you look at Berkowitz of of violent or kind of psychotic behavior, if you will. And I don't mean psychotic in like the technical term. Everybody, you know what the fuck I'm talking about, right? Somebody who's a nut job. So for me, that's really weird, right? If you look at somebody like Dahmer, okay, he has the traditional serial killer path. Kills when he's younger, takes a lot of time off, then kills, then perfects it, and the killings become, more and more increased, and he's killing people every other week. But Berkowitz just kind of goes on this, what seems to be a very random killing spree out of nowhere, which would lend credence to maybe something happened when he was in the military.
I think that also starts to answer the question a little bit when you say, the multiple shooters theory. Is it this network of other people that are kind of hanging around? When you look at his confession, right? Like that was like the most chilling part to me when I've in both docuseries and doing independent research and watching that again is like he's smiling, he's so happy, he's calm, he's really composed, and all of his confessions he's really composed too. I think when you have somebody that's sort of out of their freaking mind, right? You're either very calculated and careful, which he was. Like if he didn't get that traffic ticket, he's never caught, right? Which is it's interesting. Everything was very clean. He really wasn't doing. He was going and they were executions. That's all it was. Walk up, pop, walk away. Just nothing else at the scene, which is very different than a lot of the other serial, like the Bundys and stuff. There's affairs going on there. The John Wayne Gacy, he's assaulting these people. There's always something else. There's always that break. He was so aligned and so normal and proud of it and just calculated and then happy and then calm about it. That's somebody that's under some like deep psychological distress, right? And I don't know that you can break to that degree to be that apathetic and have had still lived a very normal life where nobody had any inclination whatsoever that you were a whack job. There was also a little bit of information that I saw, and maybe you saw it too, that I thought was very striking. In the 90s, your boy Maury Terry, see how easily I said that there, while he was, I don't know if it was in the midst of, I guess it would be way before this documentary, but maybe he was starting to write the book and whatnot, but he's obviously been very well researched on this. He decides to submit a FOIA request on Berkowitz to see any of his activity in relation to cults. And a lot of the records he got back were heavily redacted. Why would that be? Generally, documents that are redacted because they have ties to intelligence. There's no documents that obviously explicitly tie him to MKUltra, but the fact that there are records that are censored does raise eyebrows. I don't know that anybody's tried to do that since. I'd love to just get a crash course on who I got to contact for FOIA requests. Do I just send the FOIA office and they just look at everything, or do I have to be hyper specific? Because these are the things that you and I would probably spend a lot of time trying to do and seeing what we could figure out. But that to me is interesting when you start to look at the bigger picture, right? The idea that he's in a group, the idea that he's being told or commanded on what to do, the idea that he's hearing these voices and he's able to flip this switch. The movements are calculated. The weapon he uses is very intentional, right? The slug he's using, it's not a common weapon. There's just a lot of aspects to this. And then that very last case, and I forgot her name, she lived, but she said that, she was convinced that it was Berkowitz that came after her, and he's denied it and denied it and denied it. Said, well, it was a different gun. I didn't own that gun. Doesn't really matter, right? You didn't have to own that gun, but she was so convinced, she was dead set. And even though I said before the witness thing, right? Like it's always hard to get that sketch, but I do also believe that the opposite could be true. Is like when you've went through something and somebody has impacted your life to that degree, that image of them is scarred in your brain. I think there's some credence to the fact that that's who it is. Obviously for her, she'd love to just get it off her chest for some reason. Maybe for her, just sleeping at night knowing that it was him is enough. And maybe so maybe she's just filling the gaps there. But I thought that was very telling, and he insisted that it wasn't him. Was it not him, or did he not remember it because of the influence he was under? So I don't know, man. That's really where my mind goes with the Berkowitz thing. Not to rehash episode 1, but that's where really where it goes.
Listen, very, very well could be both. I'll 2 points I want to bring up, right? So you mentioned earlier about your traumatic incident about getting hit by the bus, and you said you couldn't remember what the bus driver's face looked like, right? I had a paper route when I was, 13 years old, and we were sleeping at my buddy's house, me and a few friends. It was a Saturday night. Sunday morning, you got to get up early to deliver the Sunday papers, like 6 o'clock in the morning. So before we go deliver the papers, because they were coming with me, we'll walk in to the deli to get breakfast, to get bagels. And in the bushes, we hear somebody kind of like calling us over there. And it was a fucking escaped convict, okay, that had broken out of prison. Swear, I probably never told you this. Escaped convict that had broken out of prison. He broke his hand. It was ballooned up. It was huge. He said he broke his hand hopping the fence. And he wanted to know, there was like a cop car down the block, if the cops were looking in this direction, right? Now, granted, nothing happened. I think like one of my friends gave the guy a cigarette. We said, nah, cops aren't looking at you, and he went on his way. And granted, that wasn't a traumatic experience for me, but it's a fucking weird one, right? Like, how many people can say that they ran into an escaped convict, right? Point being, I could tell you exactly what that guy looks like today. Like, granted, if it wasn't 25 years ago, obviously the guy aged, I could pick him out of a lineup today, right?
Interesting.
So it is interesting the way the mind works, what you do remember, what you don't remember. It's an interesting thing, and I think you raise a really good point, right? Like, maybe, conversely, that image is seared into somebody's brain because it was so traumatic that they can read every line on that person's face. Who knows? Not a psychologist. But I want to go back to one thing that we were just talking about, the method of the killings in general, right? So, supposedly Berkowitz, used the gun, okay? That's got to be the most informal way to kill somebody, right? If you look at most serial killers, right, how are they doing it? They're stabbing somebody, they're strangling them, they're beating them with brute force. It's a more, I don't want to make this sound like a fun thing, but it's a much more personal experience, right? It just, the way that he was killing people just doesn't fit the mold of your traditional serial killer. It more so fits the mold of somebody who they either just completely snapped or was under some kind of direction. Right? Like, don't you find that aspect of it to be just a little strange?
I find that I think that's a really good point. I think you nailed all that. Because, like, again, like, it's not like he knew who they were. It's not like he stalked them. There was even the one case where, like, the certain people asked, he was going to kill them, and they asked for help. He's like, oh, okay, well, I'm needed. I don't need to do it. And it, like, broke him out of that trance almost, right? And
the people that were stuck in the snow. Yep.
Right. And it's almost like he needed it to be informal. He needed to have no connection to them and get no enjoyment out of it. And why is that? And, again, I'm gonna keep getting back to the MKUltra theory. Is like, I feel like once you have that personal connection, it's going to cloud the ability to be effectively hypnotized, right? Because you have to start using your brain to think and formulate a response or formulate a reaction. It just, I don't know. It seems strange to me. There was obviously a lot of discussions back and forth with Berkowitz when he was in prison, whether it be the dog thing, talking about the cult, things like that. He often kept alluding to the fact, I didn't do it alone. I didn't do it alone. He did name John and Michael Carr, as you alluded to, who, of course, both died from very mysterious circumstances. Michael Carr in 1979, so right after, in a car accident in North Dakota, and John Carr in 1978 from an apparent suicide by gunshot. Convenient. I don't know that you're going to see a demonic cult that's necessarily going to be aligned to that. Again, if you're under the guise of that, but that seems very much along what we've seen a lot of other times when the government has gotten involved. and taking somebody away. Okay,
So
shake
what
that
I
finger, baby.
what I will say there, right? And look, I'm more aligned with you on the subject of it potentially being an MK Ultra thing, right? I think that's the more fun narrative, if you will. But the cult doesn't just stop with the children, which was this local cult that was in Yonkers. They're also connected with another cult that came about in the '60s that was called, oh God, what the hell are they called? The Process Church of the Final Judgment. Okay,
Okay.
so the Process Church of the Final Judgment. Um, Again, they came about they yes, they came about in the '60s. They were in London. They were all former. What's the best way to say this without getting banned? What's the terminology I think you used most recently? A Tom Cruiseologist. They
Oh,
were they
okay,
were former
interesting.
Tom Cruiseologists,
Okay.
and so it is suspected that the children were an offshoot of the process. And the reason
Mm,
why I bring that up is for two things, right? First and foremost, if they truly were an offshoot and had any connection, whether it be formal or informal, with this larger group called the process, there's certainly more power, right? You're talking about a much larger group now. People that are wealthy, people that do have things to lose. And so if they wanted to mop this up, there's a little bit more incentive, A, to mop it
yeah,
up, and B,
right.
they might have had the resources to mop it up, if you will. But I want to just drive this nail into the coffin a little bit more. Do you know who visited with the process of the final judgment?
I mean, I hope it's a rhetorical question
Another
because the answer to me is no.
very notable serial killer from the 1960s? One Charles Manson. And what do we
Interesting.
know about Charles Manson?
Yeah,
It's
he
almost
is.
undeniable at this point
Yeah,
that
he's
Charles
confirmed MK
Manson
Ultra. Yeah,
was a product of MK Ultra.
yeah,
So you
CIA
have
asset. Yeah,
multiple ties there, right? And
mm,
granted, these are loose, right? Like I want to go out and
yeah.
just make it very clear. These are loose ties. There's no actual hard evidence. None of this was really, really confirmed. A lot of this really comes from Maury Terry's, the investigation that he did. So it's not hard facts, but it's certainly interesting, wouldn't you say?
Mm. I think that's really interesting, and I think if there's one thing we've sort of tied together in the, you know, I don't even know, year and a half that we've done this at this point, I don't think that any of these elite groups work in silos necessarily. Or I take that back. I think they do work in silos and then they sort of unify it under an umbrella. And so I don't know that it necessarily has to be mutually exclusive if it was an MK Ultra or Tom Cruiseology or a satanic cult. I think there could be threads that link them all together. And when you look at all of that, you look at Manson, who again, notable CIA asset, notable MK Ultra patient, military experiments, everything. I mean, this is fact checked to a degree. You look that he was part of that Church of Satan, and then now you could tie it across the United States here. Yeah, I think there's some interesting threads to pull on there. It's
There
hard
are.
to say always because when you always want the confessions, right? And I think a lot of people love the idea of hearing these stories because I know for me personally, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, is like I love to know what makes people think the way they do or want to do. Like the psychology of the human mind is so fascinating to me, and I know to you as well. But you're also talking to somebody that's a madman, whether it's contrived because of something else or whether it's just the guy broke at one point. So immediately your credibility is shot. And then the fact that this guy has lied and changed the story and went back and forth on different aspects of it the whole time also ruins that credibility. And despite the fact that, he's born again and whatnot, you always have that lingering thought too, is like, well, are you just trying to save face now? And maybe you've just sort of you went a life sentence, you didn't get executed, right? So it's like maybe you're just trying to clean up your image a little bit, show people that you could change. You're just trying to make it a little bit easier for yourself. So are you maybe withholding more evidence? Are you changing the story again? Are you just kind of clean it up so you don't look as much as a psycho? I don't know.
Dude, you know what? It's funny you say that because I think it's like it might even be in the opening, but very early on in the Confessions of a Killer, in Berkowitz's own words, you hear him saying, and I'm going to paraphrase here, the reason why I want to do this story, the reason why I want to speak to whoever the journalist was, is because I want people to see that David Berkowitz isn't a bad guy. I'm not a bad guy. And it's like, are you out of your fucking mind? Of
Right.
course you're a fucking bad guy. You killed 6 people and you maimed 7 others. You're the worst, one of the worst fucking human beings to ever walk the face of the planet. So it's like, dude, these people are just fucking whacked out. They're shot, right?
Yeah.
For whatever reason, whether he shot on his own, maybe somebody else shot his brain out, whatever it might be, they're fucking shot. Shot out messes.
Yeah. Love to hear what each of you out there think. Are we missing a thread that we didn't pull on today that you're aware of? Do you have a connection to a Sons of Sam-ologist that can really kind of deep dive into this with a little bit more? Do you believe the satanic rituals? Do you think that it's just cut and dry and he just kind of went nuts, got pissed, didn't get laid enough, and walked around 2 cars just trying to get revenge? Leave a comment below, whether it's Spotify, YouTube, or any of social channels. Follow us on each and every one of them as well at conspiracyrealist.com. Mr. Phillips, another great episode.
Cheers.
This is a good one. I enjoyed this one.
I enjoyed it.
Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, raise your glass to mysteries. This is another episode of Cocktails and Conspiracies. So long, everybody. Tired of dragging around that clunky old grill to every tailgate or campsite? Hitchfire has your back. Literally. Their rugged hitch-mounted grills are built for adventure. Just swing it out, fire it up, and get cooking anywhere your vehicle takes you. And I've got a code to hook you up. Use Shane-Game-Day-15 at checkout for 15% off your entire order. Head to hitchfire.com and upgrade your outdoor game. You can also use the QR code on your screen now. Hitchfire, built to burn wherever you roam.